This is my favorite topic of all time, and maybe the thing that I'm best at in the world. Today, I would like to talk to you about how to delegate. So, you are the problem. And this will always be true in your life, but it's especially true with delegation. I can tell you we have almost 100 trained EAs. We encounter problems all the time with people that hire our EAs, and 9 times out of 10, probably 9 times out of 100, the problem is not with the EA, it's with the employer. The employer is the problem. Entrepreneurs are epigenetically different. That's a fact. Douglas Brackman wrote a really interesting book called Driven. It's what we named our mastermind after. And what he was able to identify is there's an epigenetic difference in terms of how entrepreneurs experience the chemical cocktail that is it's the same chemical cocktail you experience when you feel love. It's dopamine and serotonin up and norepinephrine down. 1 in 20 people experience that chemical cocktail in pursuit of a goal, which is interesting because 19 out of 20 people experience that chemical cocktail when they've accomplished a goal. Those are normal people. They're actually better humans than you are too, by the way. Far more likely to go to heaven. They compute things in a more linear fashion. You are broken in many, many ways, but in this way especially. And it's what empowers you to be an entrepreneur. You have a superpower. But because you don't necessarily identify your superpower, you don't get to see all of the things that come alongside it as potential weaknesses. Every light has a shadow. Every prowess has a weakness. And until we identify those and attend to them, we're always going to be victimized by them. And in many, many ways, we're victimized by ourselves as entrepreneurs. And we do it over and over and over again. And we're going to talk about how and why. But it's important to internalize this, not in a shameful way. It just is what it is. It's also important to internalize this because you have to understand how you're different than your employees. Very often I hear people say like, oh, it's so hard to find good help and nobody wants to work. It's not true. It's not true. There are extraordinary miracles available to you in the world, but they don't think the way you think. They don't work the way you work. They don't function the way you function. They don't experience life the way you experience it, and they don't see through the lens that you see. Sometimes you're blessed to find an entrepreneur and hire them because some entrepreneurs end up wanting jobs for whatever reason. Sometimes you're blessed to find an entrepreneur. But I will tell you, 19 out of 20 of the resources that are available to you are going to be more traditional thinkers. And so it's important for us to understand where we diverge so we're better equipped to handle them and handle ourselves. Most entrepreneurs, in my experience, are terrified of competence. And this doesn't go away with age. Most entrepreneurs are subconsciously afraid of hiring somebody smarter than themselves. Sometimes this is not so subconscious. And it makes sense that that would be the case. It makes sense that we would have a hard time bringing somebody into our sandbox who's going to outpace us when it comes to everything that we're doing. The fear is logical because number one, you're exposing yourself and your weaknesses. Number two, you're also putting yourself at risk, right? What happens if the person steals my client, steals my business, ends up being better than me, makes a departure, becomes my competitor? All those are very real, very viable risks. And because those risks exist, we mitigate the risk by hiring people that we can manage, manageable people. Manageable people are safe. They're not going to steal from you. They need you. And because of that, we feel safer with them. The problem with manageable people is manageable people need to be managed. And so you find yourself in this position where you're constantly king of the castle, king or queen of the castle. But that means that you always have to be there managing these people because that's the framework that you've opted into. And so this takes a little bit of soul searching. I'll leave it to you to decide where you are on the spectrum. I think everybody exists somewhere on the spectrum that I'll call fear of competence. And you get to decide, are you on the extreme end of like, I'm terrified of everybody who could possibly show me up, or are you moving towards shallow waters to where you don't mind people being able to take things and run with them? No matter what, to some degree, we're all a little afraid of competence because comparison is the thief of joy. And everybody's going to compare themselves to everybody, and that's what humanity chooses to do. The thing that I think is most important for us to understand as entrepreneurs is authorship creates ownership. And the reason I'm positing this now, this has more to do with your employees than it will to do with you. But you are the catalyst. You're the progenitor. You're the beginning. You're the spark. And because of that, it's forgivable that you will want to continue to be that in perpetuity, especially within your organization. You want to keep putting your name on stuff. Julian, who works for me, wrote a book called The AEO Blueprint. And then at the bottom of the book, some douchebag put his name on it because that's what entrepreneurs do. We need some level of control. The problem with that is whoever authors the task owns the task. And what that means is if you want people to begin owning things within your organization, it means we have to let them author it. And that's scary. And that's a kissing cousin to the being afraid of competence. We're afraid of competence. We're also afraid of not being the author. And these are fears that we need to get over, and we can get over them very, very, very slowly. There's a way to slow roll our way into this. There is a scientifically backed phenomena called the self-enhancement bias. This is worth Googling. What's interesting about it is it's basically just hubris, right? It's people who think everything gets better when they participate. And what most employees can tell you is that's not true. As a matter of fact, when you participate in tasks or endeavors, they tend to get worse. Again, you are the spark. And when we allow people to take things and run with them, especially if we're hiring peak performers and bringing in people that are better than us, believe it or not, they're going to do it better than you could do it. But we need to give them the opportunity to prove that. And that means a long leash. And that also means less intervention. So if you have the time and the inclination, I would look into self-enhancement bias because there's a ton of clinical literature on it, and it'll just give you better insights into the managerial mind. The managerial mind, the middle manager that lives in all of us thinks, I need to participate in order, one, to justify my existence, and two, to improve on this process. And I'm here to tell you that I don't believe that's true. As a matter of fact, if we can stay away from that from a framework perspective, we actually amplify the efficacy of our organization by a significant degree, and we fight bureaucratic infrastructure, meaning we avoid the need for middle managers, minimums, and quotas. Because the minute you have middle managers, minimums, and quotas, you now have an organization that's fighting to be mediocre. A minimum and a quota is the precursor to forced mediocrity. That's what you're asking for. This is the most mediocre that somebody can be, and this is what I need of you. And it's the self-enhancement bias is the beginning of that flywheel. The next thing that's worth a Google is faith and supervision. A lot of managerial minds believe that work needs to be supervised in order to be productive. You know, as an entrepreneur, that's not true because you don't need to be supervised. But then for some reason, when we put on our manager hat, we decide people need to be supervised in order to be productive. I don't believe that's true. Not only do I not believe that's true, I actually fire people that need to be supervised. I just choose not to work with them. I hire people that I think are adults, that can manage themselves, that can do amazing work without my intervention. And if I find out work's not being done, the first time I assume it's my fault. Hey, Larkin, appreciate you so much, dude. You've been awesome. I loved hiring you. Our interview was great. Remind them why they were brought in. You have this prowess, this prowess, this prowess. I got to tell you, though, the output feels lower than it should be. What am I doing wrong? Like, where's my misunderstanding? And very, very, very often, by the way, you'll find out you are misunderstanding. And you've had the conversation. Second time it happens. First time it happens is my fault. Second time it happens, it's your fault. Hey, dude, you remember that conversation we had that I put in writing and then emailed you about afterwards to make sure I had clear documentation? Here it is, by the way, just so you can have a refresh. What's going on? Like, do you not want the job? I'm a small business. I don't have the time, effort, energy to do this. And at that point, if I don't hear a good response or a good answer, this isn't a good fit for either of us. And I feel like that's very clear and very fair, as long as I'm being open to the fact that this could be my fault. If I hear a good response and a good answer, maybe there's an opportunity for growth. By the third time, you're fired. It is what it is. Faith and supervision really means we don't have the right people on the right seats on the right bus, because they need to be watched in order to do their job. And if somebody needs to be watched in order to do their job, my opinion is they're not doing their job. Your job is to do your job without being watched, without being reminded, without being asked, without being told. Supervision should not be something built in from a necessary perspective into the framework of an organization that's sub 100 employees. As you get to over 100 employees, you have no choice. And then guess what happens? The organization goes bureaucratic by literal definition, unless you're able to do it. And then there's some companies that have fought this really, really well. And when you look at those companies, what you'll find is they're not one big company. They're lots of little companies. Google does this really well. All Google teams are sub 10-person teams, all of them. And 30 to 40% of the time are spent on what they want to accomplish. They're very, very, very nimble. And without supervision, Google basically hires the best people and says, go build something amazing. Come back to us and show us what you got. And they have the luxury to be able to do that. So what I would like from all of us in the 3X Freedom community is to abandon faith and supervision. You don't need to supervise a product for it to be good. One, if somebody needs supervision, they're the wrong person. Now, that doesn't mean we don't have collaboration, participation, group, like those things are different, right? Supervision is me looking over your shoulder. It's the old school 90s manufacturing plant mezzanine boss sitting up there with a cigar, just making sure everybody's doing their work. We don't play that game. This is the hardest one, and I still don't know how to do this, by the way. I'm cracking the code as this goes. In a post-AI world, the incentive between employer and employee is disassociated because generally speaking, we're paying people for time. We're paying people for time, but time and output aren't connected the way that they were in a pre-AI world. As a matter of fact, if I'm paying somebody for time. Let's say I'm paying somebody to create sprockets, and it takes them 8 hours to create the 100 sprockets I need from them a day as my minimum quota. And there's a way for them to automate the process to where those 100 sprockets can be created with, instead of 8 hours of their time, an hour of their time, because now all they need to do is supervise the mechanism and do a little like QA. We have misaligned incentives, because if they do that, I only need them for an hour. And if I'm paying them for them time, they just decreased their income to an eighth or increased my output to 800%, but our incentives are misaligned. Those are massively misaligned incentives. In a post AI world, paying people for time misaligns incentives. Now, I run a staffing agency that, guess what, pays people for time, right? Most employees are being paid by time. I don't know what the answer is yet. I think it's something like profit share. I think it's something like, hey, when I benefit, you'll benefit, and let me show you how. Or if you're not hiring people on full time, which I still think is very, very, very necessary, by the way, it could be, instead of paying for time, it's paying for output. Hey, I need videos edited, and I'll pay you $50 for every video you edit. And the more efficient they get, the more money they make. We did this at Solutions 8. Towards the very end, we stopped paying our strategists according to time, and we started paying them according to ad spend under management. And when I sold my business, one person managed 40% of the ad spend of the entire company with 100 employees. His name is John Moran. He's the smartest Google Ads mind in the world. And he, by the way, got 10% of my company. What's interesting about this is aligning your incentives with your employees puts you at a disadvantage on paper. You're at a disadvantage on a spreadsheet, because you look at it and you're like, gosh, if I let Vicente get too smart and too strong, I'm going to really owe him something more than what I'm paying him. That feels like a disadvantage. But what I'll tell you is, the thing that you're afraid of, the thing that I'm afraid of, the thing that employers are all afraid of, is the best thing that could possibly happen to you. If you really think about what it is that we're afraid of, I'm afraid this person is going to provide so much value and make me so much money that they'll be in a position to leverage to a greater degree whatever it is that I'm paying them. That's amazing. That's a great place to be, right? And then the question becomes, would you rather have a whole grape or a piece of a watermelon, which is the way to think about all business. So aligned incentives. And I don't think this means everybody needs to be commission-based, everybody needs to be output-based. That doesn't mean that at all. Some people, and again, by the way, incidentally, the 19 out of 20 people that are not entrepreneurial prefer consistent and predictable income. So I think a salary is still okay, but sometimes what that means is the incentive is simply like, hey, I don't expect you to work the whole day. I expect you to get this amount of stuff done. That's a very, very, very aligned incentive. How do we align our incentives? And that'll be conversations that we continue to go, because again, I don't know how to do this. Scott Christina Hooper here. I wonder if that's why I run into so many early stage entrepreneurs that actually want someone to supervise them. I need someone to tell me what to do, hold me accountable, etc. They internally believe that they need that. Yeah, I think you're exactly right. I think a lot of that is pre-rev and early stage entrepreneurs. So pre-rev makes no money. Early stage makes 0 to 250K. Why are those numbers? Because 0 is an obvious benchmark. Up to 250K is about the amount of money you can make as a freelancer before you would start needing help. So it's you by yourself. 0 to 250K is you by yourself. He's talking to his boardroom, and he says, what do these people really want and need? Here's what's crazy. What they say they want. And if you're watching the recording, by the way, this might be you, because the majority of my community is this group, is this demographic, it's this avatar. So again, prepare to be offended. What you say you want when you're 0 to 250K is clarity. They say they want clarity. They want clarity. They want a roadmap. They want a framework. I want clarity. I need to know what to do. What they really want is permission. They want someone to come and tap them on the shoulder and say, it's okay for you to move on, move forward, step up, take the reins. This is why in that group, the thing that they love more than anything else is certification. That group of people will spend an immense amount of money, time, effort, energy on certifications, because certifications are just another way to say permission. And what's really interesting about the entrepreneurial ecosystem is there's no such thing as permission. As a matter of fact, an entrepreneur by definition is somebody who chooses not to wait for permission. They go against that which is permissible, right? They do something that's not been done before. Most people are waiting for permission. If you're an entrepreneur, you might actually be repelled by permission. So a lot of the people that want supervision, it's not just supervision that they want, it's the permission. And that's important for us to know. That's important for us to know when we're managing employees. Here's the thing about you, Mr. or Mrs. Honor. You have to lead. Such an uncomfortable place to be. It's extraordinarily uncomfortable, because that means you have to step up and say, follow me. And guess what? Whatever happens after that, your fault, right? Follow me. And it's Moses leading you into the desert for 40 years and 40 days. It's like, I'm so sorry that we're starving to death. This is my fault. And please continue to follow me. Permission. So In a lot of ways, what we're allowing for, what we're offering our employees is permission. This is why I see this a lot with early stage entrepreneurs. You see them bring people on and then kind of play this, all right, what do you guys want to do game? I did that as a young man. He was like, I was waiting for my employees to sort of tell me where we should go. And that becomes a dog chasing its tail. You have to step up. You have to lead. And not with arrogance. You can lead with humility. You can ask for feedback. But at the end of the day, everybody needs to know, all right, I'm making the decision. Interestingly, democratically run companies tend to flounder. And you see that over and over and over again. You see it with amazing, I mean, Apple has more cash on hand than the US government, but since the death of Steve Jobs, they've done zero innovation. Somebody tell me otherwise. They've invented nothing. They've created nothing. They made the iPhone a little bigger, the iPad a little smaller. Like, you know what I mean? It's like they're just tweaking sizes because there's no leadership there. Leadership comes from a person. Let's keep going. I want to talk to you about your EA. If you don't have an EA, I have the greatest framework in the world for finding the best talent on the planet. It's yours for free. It's in the community. I wrote a book. I wrote a worksheet. I wrote a cheat sheet. I did an audiobook. I have all the templates, and it will cost you $0. There's no excuse. You can get an EA in East Asia. You can get a part-time EA for $250 a month. If you're in business making any amount of money, there's no reason not to have this. Soapbox over. But not really, because I'll continue to talk about it forever. Let's talk about your EA. One, find people smarter and more capable than you. This goes back to the fact that we're all a little afraid of competence. Now, when I say that it's smarter and more capable than you upon the level of analysis that we are discussing, my favorite example of all time is John Moran. John Moran was the most extraordinary human I've ever encountered. He was actually my client before I hired him. Fun story. I worked for him and his dad. He was a nightmare to work for. I remember one time I owed them a deliverable on a software application we were building, and my vendor didn't deliver it, and so I wasn't going to be able to deliver it. And I owed it on a Friday. And I thought to myself, if I can just get through the weekend, I can send it on Monday and it'll be fine. And I owed it Friday morning. And so I got an email from him Friday morning saying like, hey man, just checking in, making sure we're going to get this. And I didn't respond. And then I got a text message. Hey buddy, just making sure you got my email. And I didn't respond. And then I got a phone call. Hey buddy, just making sure you got my text message. And I didn't respond. And I'm sitting in my office and it's like 3 o'clock. And I'm like, get to 5. And then I have every excuse. And I hear outside and I look around the corner through the glass door and there's John Moran. And he drove the 25 minutes down to my office because he was the most proactive human I've ever encountered in my entire life. And I opened the door and I was like, dude, I'm hiding from you. I don't have it. And he goes, that's all right. I just wanted to make sure, and he held me accountable to a degree that I've never been held accountable for. And he could solve any problem. And he was so smart and so industrious. He blew my mind. And so his business ended up being taken down by a bad investor that tried to steal their IP. And when I found this out, I stalked him. I was like, dude, come work with me, please. And he's like, you can't afford me. He went and got a sales job at the time, and he's making well into the 6 figures. And I couldn't pay him that. At the time, I was paying myself $6,000 a month. And I thought, I'll give him everything I'm paying myself for 90 days, and that'll be enough time for us to build the business, and I can start taking money again. And he's like, what's the most you can pay me? And I'm like, $6,000 a month. And that would have been 100% of my salary. And then I would only have about 90 days to be able to do that, because that's about what I had in savings. To live my life for 90 days. And he kept saying no. And then I'd call him and he'd say no. But here's what I knew. He's making 6 figures at a sales job, working 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. And he loves his wife and he loves his daughters. And I knew he was going to burn out. And I was just a predator. I was like, hey buddy, how's it going? And I finally got him on the right day. And he's like, all right, let's do it. And so he joined. I told him, I was like, we got 90 days. And he's like, all right. And he and I built Solutions 8 together. And it was the best experience of my life. Here's what happened. John ends up running 40% of my revenue in a 100-person organization. He starts as an employee. I'm paying his salary. I gave him raises right away, got him to the 6 figures as soon as I could, because I knew I needed to keep him. And that's what you do with good employees. And then it got to a point where I was like, dude, if this guy leaves, he could have made, we were doing $2.5 million EBITDA. So net profit on, I forget, like $5 million in gross rev, let's say. He could have taken all of our best clients, worked part-time, and made $2 million net to him. So I slapped golden handcuffs on him. I give him 10%. I actually tried to give him more of the company. He didn't want it for reasons that we will discuss. But I was always like, why is he here? Why is he working for me? Why doesn't he just take these clients and go? Who can guess, after we made our exit, we sold to a SoftBank-backed MarTech company for 8 figures. I got 90, he got 10. I still won. I don't mean I won over him. I mean, I won the game of entrepreneurship, right? I had to give away equity and I still won. Guess what John did after we sold our business? Somebody guess, quick like a bunny. He went and he got another job. This guy is now Google Ads famous. The whole world knows him. You can't troll any forum, group, community without running into his name if it pertains to Google Ads. He could have been making multi-million dollars net to him by starting his own agency. And instead, he goes and he works for another agency. Why? Because he's an artist. He's a magician. He's a genius. He's a brilliant engineer, tactician. He doesn't want to own a business. He doesn't want to do those things. This is generally true. Your job is to build a sandbox. Their job is to build a sandcastle. What you will find, generally speaking, people who are really good at building sandboxes, not so good at building sandcastles, e.g., you. And people really good at building sandcastles, not so good at managing the sandbox. So don't be afraid of competence. Find people smarter and more capable than you. That's the prerequisite. If you can't come with me on this paradigm shift, then you'll never be able to delegate. And it's smarter and more capable than you upon the level of analysis that you're hiring them for. John wasn't as good as I am at finding talent or managing finances or honestly marketing. He was really, really good at the thing I needed him to be good at. Number two, manageable people need to be managed. I'm beating this drum again because it's true. If somebody needs to be managed, they're not right. And here's the thing that really sucks is generally speaking, you like these people. These are your sacred cows. These are folks that have been with you for a long, long time and they've been loyal and they're kind and they're fun to be around and you've gone out maybe for happy hour together. But if you need to continue to check in with them, they're not the right person in your organization. You're not running a nonprofit. Thank you so much. I love you so much. I really wish the best for you. I'll help you transition out, release them to the market. People that need to be managed will drag you down. Your time is your least scalable resource. You're the least scalable resource of your business. And the more attention that's being splintered, the more damage they're doing to you, your organization, your growth, and all other employees. And they teach other employees how to behave, which that's the thing about company culture. Company culture is so important for a reason. Manageable people need to be managed, and they teach everybody else that management is what we should be asking for. And you'll actually find, I found this at Solutions 8, there comes a tipping point where the employees outnumber you, not in terms of quantity, but in terms of ability to influence culture. And then you get things like, I remember when employees came after us and they're like, we want quarterly reviews. And I don't believe in quarterly reviews for a bunch of reasons that we can get into. But I was outnumbered from a culture perspective and I didn't plant the seed early enough. And so what did we start doing? We start doing quarterly reviews. What do quarterly reviews do? Force bureaucracy. Manageable people need to be managed. Get rid of them early and often. Early and often, get them out of your organization. Stay nimble, stay lean. That's your only value proposition to small businesses. There's a massive difference between employees and entrepreneurs. Even somebody who's entrepreneurial that works for you, because they're in an environment and they're wearing the hat of employee, needs to be treated differently. Now, here's the thing about entrepreneurs that frustrates me a little bit. We refer, like the term 9-to-5er is a pejorative. It's a 9-to-5er. They're a W-2. We refer to employees as though they're less than. And what's really interesting is the opposite, I believe, is true. They're far more consistent to degrees that you and I could never even begin to fathom or wrap our hands around, right? They're actually more reliable. In so many ways, they're more honest and more integrous. They're more linear in their thinking. There's a lot of reasons that a 9-to-5er is a better person. You're not going to be able to benefit from that if you continue to view them through the lens of, oh, you're lazy. I remember this happened recently at Pareto. A gal tried to hire one of our EAs. And we mentioned that we enforce 20 days PTO, which in the States is like 20 days. Are you freaking kidding me? That's insane. I've never given 20 days. You know what's funny about that? In Latin America, they're like 20 days. Are you kidding me? I get 50. So we're sitting here trying to bridge the gap between two very, very, very different cultures. And this woman goes, I'm not giving 20 days because I don't take 20 days. And my business partner who's on the phone with her didn't say this, but he's like, how's that relevant? Who cares how much time you take? And she's like, I need people as dedicated to my business as I do. And what's so funny about that logic, it's so easy to dismantle. It's like, well, do they get paid what you do? Do they own the equity that you do? When you make an exit, are you going to split that with them pari passu? You know what I mean? This isn't a pari passu relationship. This is a balance. It's a negotiation. They're different. That's not worse. The fact that a 9-to-5er only wants to work 9 to 5 is different. It's not worse. And I run into this at Pareto too. There are people who are like, well, do they take calls on nights and weekends? No. Slave driver, they don't. You can negotiate for that. You can say, hey, I actually have a very specialized role. It's a customer service role, and it's going to require that somebody, and again, that's a negotiation. But the entrepreneurial mindset is we're always on. That's because you're the entrepreneur. Somebody wanting to check out, wanting to have work-life balance, like that's perfectly acceptable. It's a paradigm shift. It's a change. And the opposite is true about them too. You, Mr. and Mrs. Entrepreneur, are wildly inconsistent. One might call you bipolar. Peaks and valleys, peaks and valleys, peaks and valleys, up and down, up and down, up and down. I have an idea. Oh, that's a bad idea. Oh, let's move this. Shiny object, right? That's who you are. And it's great. It's part of your superpower. It's also part of your weakness. Guess what they are? Consistent. Guess what you need? Consistent. So that 9-to-5 request that makes you so pissed pre-9 and post-5 is one of their greatest strengths. Is from 9 to 5, man, right as rain. Set a watch to it, right? Different. Not worse, just different. You have to expect miracles. People are the most extraordinary, universal, and cosmic event that has ever happened, as far as I know. Like every human is a manifestation of God incarnate. And if you don't want to believe that, or if you don't believe in God, then even an atheist would have to look at the absolute impossibility of this super smart chimp floating around on this spinning rock, building shit and solving problems. Like, people are amazing. People are amazing. People are extraordinary. People are miracles. They can do so much. What they're capable of is so incalculably bigger than anything that we can even fathom. Every human is a potential miracle. And you have to expect that, and you have to treat them that way. Now, this cuts both ways. Every human is a miracle. That means that we treat them that way. And every human is a miracle. That means my expectation is miracle. Show up and show me miracles, or get out. Show up and show me the best you're capable of. Move the needle in a way that I couldn't even begin to do myself or understand, or get out. I asked Vicente to create this slide deck for me. And the thing the guy created, I sent him bullet points in an email. I'm like, this. And he created a slide deck that I remember. I'm looking at some of the images he created, and you'll start to see them as we're going through this lesson. This will get really meta and really fun. And the imagery he created helped me understand what I wanted to teach better. Like, that's amazing. You know what I mean? That's amazing. That's miraculous. That's the expectation. So people are miracles. One, expect miracles. And then two, treat them like miracles. You have to do both. If you don't, what you're doing is you're expecting of people something that's no greater than what AI can do. And there's no reason to have a person. Just go prompt it from ChatGPT. What's interesting about AI is it's put us in an ecosystem where the only things that you can benefit from in terms of the human endeavor are that which is ineffable. It's not scalable. It's difficult to define. That's what we need to expect from people. If your only expectation from a person is to sit down and follow this process, you're doing it wrong. And it's why billion-dollar organizations actually they're at a disadvantage. They can't treat people the way that you and I can treat people. They can't expect from Quicken Loans, can't tell other employees, go produce miracles, right? They can't. They have to say, sit down here, follow this process, follow the script, and I need, 30 loans from you a month, or whatever their quota is. That's the best they can do. I have an army of crack assassins, y'all, like bloodthirsty killers. I'm so impressed with my team. I was on a call this morning, and the things that we were coming up with, like, I presented an idea for 25 minutes. I spoke, and then for 5 minutes, Julian, who's worked with me for a year now, improved upon my idea to a degree that I didn't think was possible. That's what you should expect. Expect miracles. Authorship creates ownership. Where have we seen this before? Authorship creates ownership. Let people author. Let them have it. Let them go. I have businesses that I hate the name and the URL and the logo of. And the person who created it is probably right and I'm probably wrong. What happens with a logical, industrious human being when you ask somebody to do something and then you show up later and you say, oh, you know what? Change the square to a circle. Change red to blue. Move that line. What happens? They take their hands off the wheel. And they're like, all right, I guess Christina's driving now. And the second worst thing that can happen is that project fails. Because now it's like, boss, that's not my fault. You told me change the square to circle and change red to blue. The first worst thing that can happen is the project succeeds, because now they feel zero buy-in whatsoever. Let people create, and then only critique that which is objectively true. You might show up and say, hey, the studs need to be 18 inches apart. Otherwise, the building inspector will come and make us rebuild the whole damn thing. That's objectively true. There's nothing we can do about it. And even then, that's probably a failure on your part because you didn't give them the necessary input to know that on the front end. And you'll make mistakes. Only critique that which is objectively true. If it's subjective, shut up. Who made you God of the world, right? Let them take it. Let them run with it. And then what you'll find is even if you could improve upon it, let's say, best case scenario, you really could make this a little better. Well, what happens then? How much better are you going to make it? 5%, 10%, 50%? Maybe you make it 100%? I don't know. But then everything else associated with that project now feels like yours. It taints everything. It colors everything. It ruins everything. Let them have it. Because some things you maybe would make better, but some things of theirs are better. And if they feel the autonomy, the ownership, what you'll see with employees is, I had an employee, Ari, who's amazing. I loved her so much. She was also an absolute nut job. Her job when we brought her on was to manage the knowledge base at Solutions 8. She took everything that we taught and she distilled it into I think we use this horrible software called Guru. So she built out the Wikipedia for Solutions 8. And I just let her run with it. I'm like, take it, run with it. And she decided everything: organization, nomenclature, structure, filtering, etc. Tags. Ari gets a promotion, moves on to an entirely different part of our business. She moves on to our social media business. She keeps coming back and cleaning up Guru because for her, it was hers. She worked so hard on this damn thing that she couldn't let it go. It was such a good example of authorship creating ownership. Let people author things. Now, we talked about you. We've talked about them. Let's talk about how to make each other work. Everybody coming with me so far? Does this all feel cogent? Cool. Thanks. I keep going. These are the frameworks for delegation. I've spent my entire life doing this, y'all, and this is the culmination of all of it. I'm sure there are more, and I think each one of these deserves to be their own framework. So we're going to go faster than we should, to be frank. And I want you to have cursory understanding of all the tools on your tool belt, and then we can dive deeper on those tools as is necessary. The first and most important thing to understand with delegation is that you have to delegate projects, not tasks. If you're delegating tasks, you're not delegating at all, you're micromanaging. And this generally comes from fear, but often this comes from a lack of clarity. Here's what I think most entrepreneurs don't realize. You don't have to know everything. You don't have to know the end result. I do this all the time to great effect. I'll say, hey, I kind of think I want a podcast business. This happened, by the way. This is a true story. I went to Camilla, who works for me, and I said, I need to produce podcasts. I need to produce podcasts for my businesses. So there's multiple businesses we needed to produce podcasts for. And Camilla, you can even protect me or correct me on the way that this manifested. But my memory was, we need to produce at least one podcast, possibly two. And if we build this properly, maybe we'll have a podcast production business, but maybe it'll actually be a social media business because we're going to splinter the podcast content into social media content. And I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to do this. I don't know what tools to use. I don't know the best process. I have some ideas because I've been a podcast host for another podcast, so I can tell you what they did. Go. And then Camillo created what I think is one of the best standard operating procedures for podcast productions that I've ever seen. Camillo, will you drop that Google Drive link, the one that we gave away to the ACQ community? Let's give everybody our SOP.
Sure.
Y'all, it was extraordinary. He created an entire business in the box. And I didn't give him, go find the distribution channel, go find this, go find that, go find the software, go find whatever. I just told him, podcast. I need at least one podcast, and maybe this will become a whole business. He figured all that shit out. And by the way, he figured it out to a degree better than I would have figured it out. So don't think that when you're delegating, you have to come up with everything to delegate. The opposite is true. Delegate the project. And if you're dealing with an early stage resource that you haven't worked with and you don't have that second hand and you don't necessarily know, honestly, you don't trust them yet, just delegate smaller projects. But a project, by definition, is a list of tasks, right? So a project might be a book. And maybe you're like, I'm not ready to give this person a whole book. Maybe the smaller project is the table of contents. Delegate smaller projects and then work your way up with your resources so that they can take bigger and bigger and bigger projects. And this goes all the way to where I am with Yvonne. If y'all know Yvonne Boonin, he's my business partner in Pareto. He's also my business partner in Architects, also my business partner in TechStack. He's my business partner in a half dozen other entities because I can't get rid of him. I couldn't afford to. The kid started as my EA. He's in his early 20s going to college. I hire him. He's a Ukrainian national, but he's in Poland. I hire him as an EA. I paid him nothing. It was peanuts. He was a miracle. And he just does shit. I remember one of my favorite stories. I made $250,000 net to me off of a 3-minute voice message to Yvonne. I joined Justin Donald's investment mastermind. I just made my exit. I've got all this big bucket of money, and I don't know what to do with it because I grew up poor, and poor people don't know how to use money. And so I joined this mastermind that teaches you how to invest. And I'm listening to all these people that are brilliant, and they've had money their whole lives, and most of them, their parents had money, and so they just know the acronyms and the nomenclature, and that they're in this inside club that I just wasn't in. But they all kept talking about two things: mobile home parks, self-storage facilities. And I'm like, I know how to do that. I know how to do lead gen. They all wanted to buy mobile home parks and self-storage facilities, and they didn't know how to do it. So I send Yvonne a 3-minute voice message. I still have the voice message. I say, hey, buddy, I'm at this mastermind. There's a bunch of people here that want to buy mobile home parks and self-storage facilities. Can you do me a favor? Can you spin me up 2 websites? I need the website, the funnel, and the ad campaigns. And all I want to do is just say, I buy these asset classes fast for cash, and then create the funnel that would allow them to convert and create the ad campaigns. It was 3 minutes, the voice message. I gave him 3 minutes of context. That was on a Friday. By Monday, I have 2 websites, mhpoffers.com and kevinbuys.com. I partner with a guy named Kevin. Kevin and I bought a self-storage facility in North Carolina for $450,000 that appraises for $750,000. We made $250,000 on one deal, on our very first deal, based off of 3 minutes worth of delegation and a weekend of work from Yvonne. Because Yvonne's that good. And God forgive me for saying this, there are other Yvonnes out there. There are other people capable of being that good. You can put yourself in a position with people to where you can just say, hey, this is the project. Julian's another good example. Julian built AEO.co. Y'all, I'm going to be the world authority in the most important marketing mechanism that's ever existed because of Julian. Created the community, manages a 6-person data team, wrote the book. It's badass. And all I said was, AEO, go. You can do that. But you have to allow people to go. Authorship creates ownership, projects, not tasks. The 262 framework. Here's where we're going to get really specific. The 262 framework. You are going to give somebody 10 things to do. Let's say, just to use round numbers, because I have a 10th grade education. You're going to give somebody 10 things to do. They're going to suck miserably at 2 of them. They're going to do 6. Great. Good job, kid. Check the box. You're awesome. They're going to do 2 better than any human you've ever encountered in your entire life. Now, what are we as entrepreneurs taught to do? We are taught to take the two things they suck at and focus on them. And we say, don't worry, we're going to get you there, kiddo, and we're going to do a performance improvement program, and you're going to take this training, and I'm going to pay for this course. And you know what? Why don't you go ahead and shadow Camillo because he's so good at his job? Let's slow him down a little bit so he has to train your dumbass, right? And then we'll get you there so that the two's a little bit better. Or maybe we just don't ask him to do those two things. Because if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it spends its whole life thinking it's stupid. I had a young lady who worked for me. Her name was Julianne. Julianne was amazing. She was extraordinary. She was a professional bodybuilder. She was a record-holding deep-sea diver. She was just this dynamo of a human. She was in the Philippines. She could not be on time for anything to save her life. And it's because she had this really vibrant social life and extracurricular life. And she was my EA. It's a horrible trait to have in an EA. You know what I mean? She was late. She would forget. She was just really bad at that. But she had the greatest process mind of anybody I've ever encountered. She was so good at automation. It blew my mind. So what did I do? Julianne, you can't be my EA. You suck at this. I need somebody who's more accountable and more on time than I am. But why don't you? And then she built our Airtable from the ground up under Yvonne's tutelage. Yvonne helped a lot with that. Our Airtable, we built an Airtable, which I'm going to teach something on this. Relational databases to manage businesses. It's one of the smartest things I've ever done. Our entire business was run out of this one database that Julianne built. And the elegance with which she built it was extraordinary. In our exit, it was one of the things that I think really improved our valuation. So I took a resource that if I judged her according to her ability to accomplish all 10 things I'd given her, well, she wasn't bad at 2, by the way. She's probably bad at 5. But she was so good at her 2. She was triple PhD level. And then I figured out how to utilize her. That's the 262 framework. It's okay to delegate lots of tasks, especially to your EA. It's a fun thing about the EA. It's the one role in business that has no job description. It's like, I'm going to give you everything. And you can't expect they're good at everything. I actually have a phone call with a friend tomorrow who hired one of my EAs, and he's pissed because he's like, well, they're not good at high level. And I'm like, well, you know what I mean, dude? What do you want? What world do we live in that everybody's going to be good at everything? So we need to adjust. And you're not always going to know. That's the other problem. When you bring on a resource, and I have people say it all the time, do you think they're going to be good enough to be my director of operations? I don't know. My first EA became my director of social. My second EA became my director of automations. My third EA became my CTO and managed my entire exit and then became my best friend. I didn't know going in that's what they were good at. As a matter of fact, Ari, the girl who became our director of social, was first managing my wiki, but she ended up being better at content than she was at the distillation of information. Julianne, I didn't know would be good at automations. Yvonne, I didn't know would be, honestly, CTO wasn't even a good title for him. You're not going to know. You have to kind of let them show you. That's part of your job as the entrepreneur is, where does this resource really thrive? That's the 262 framework. Feedback and communication. Because you're the problem, the only way for you to really engage and interface with a resource that will allow for ongoing iteration, synergy, and what would feel symbiotic is to allow for two-way communication. That means that you can critique that which is objective, but you also need feedback from your resource. Sometimes that feedback is, hey, I don't have enough information. Sometimes I fight that, by the way. And this is where I do step in and be the entrepreneur. Because if somebody comes to me and I say, hey, I need you to build a website. I want a website that that allows people to sell me hand-knotted rugs. I want to do buy-sell rugs, which is a project Camillo and I worked on. If somebody comes back and they're like, okay, what color do you want? What fonts do you want? How many pages? What's on the pages? And I'll have employees, especially if people have been in business for a long, long time, they're some of my least favorite people to hire, to be honest with you, because they'll come back and they think they're managing me. And they're like, all right, well, before I do this, I need the sitemap, I need the content, I need the this, I need the that, I need the this. And I say, no, you don't. And if you need that, create it. Well, what do you want to say? I don't know. Figure it out. What should that website say? Like, I've given you the project, you go do the thing. If I have to do all the things that you just asked me to do, I don't need you anymore. Now it's done. So you need to be able to temper this, but you have to open the line of communication both ways, and you have to be receptive of everything that they're saying. Most importantly, activity to their ideas, which, to be honest with you, in our community, I don't think is going to be a problem, but I needed to give lip service to this. I already talked about this a little bit, but I'd like to hit it again. You critique that which is objective. All subjectivity you leave alone because you're probably wrong. I think that the exception to this might be if you're in a hyper creative business and you are the hyper creative guru. If you really are the Vincent Van Gogh of your graphic design agency, now subjectivity moves to objectivity because we're talking about an artistic endeavor. And even then, part of me wonders, are you really an entrepreneur? Your job is supposed to be working on the business, not in the business. So what are we doing? That which is subjective, we leave alone. This is a really, really important framework. It's funny because I have 3 employees on the call with me. So they're all going to learn all my dirty secrets. My very strong opinion is, number one, especially for new employees, an employee will never run faster than they do in the first 90 days, ever. There's no exception to that rule. An employee will never run faster than they do the first 90 days. obviously, because otherwise, here's what happens is they get into a rhythm, they get into a cadence. That's the 9 to 5. That's the consistency and the predictability. What most businesses do is they bring somebody and they're like, all right, take it easy. We're going to have you watch these training videos. And once you feel comfortable with the training videos, we'll have you shadow Johnny. And once you've shadowed Johnny, we'll assign you your very first project. And then if you do good with that project, we'll give you and then they slow roll this person. And then they spend the first 90 days lulling them to sleep. And then on day 91, they're like, all right, go, 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 go. Minimums, quotas. Why aren't you doing this? Right? It's the exact opposite way the shit should work. I want someone to show up to their first day of work and think, oh my God, I'm never going to get any of this done. That's what I want. If there are 10 things to do in a day, I give everybody 12 on purpose. It's not busy work, it's real work. I just bring it forward. I flash forward 180 days in the future and I'm like, here's all of it. And then but the expectation I manage is, and I don't expect you to die. I don't want you to kill yourself. There's something called Parkinson's Law that says that work is going to expand into the time allotted. You've also heard the phrase, if you want something done, give it to a busy person. That's this. Make people busy and you make them more productive. You put them in a position to maximize their output and their productivity. I don't want people, because people will. If I say, hey, I need you to go do research on, we're launching this new business and I'd like you to do a competitive analysis. That could be 5 minutes, 5 hours, 5 days, 5 weeks, 5 months. I want the 5-minute version, 99 times out of 100. And if I don't, I'll tell you. Max out, but don't overwhelm. Keep your resources maxed out. The thing that really bugs me, to be honest with you, I'm still cracking the code on this, and I realize that some of my clients are going to watch this video, and so I'm sorry, but I'm about to throw radical shade at you. When people come to me and they're like, I don't know what to give my EA, I've never been so tempted towards murder in my life. I'm like, are you freaking kidding me? You're an entrepreneur. You have 500 ideas a day. You all have more than one business. You all have more than you can do. Yeah, you know what I mean? Like, be stupid. All of that. Give them all of that. Give them all of that. And guess what? They're going to do it better than you can. I promise. This, I don't know what to give my EA thing. I'm just like, all right, well, I don't know how to help you. It's the lead a horse to water and then dunk his head in the water and then drown him. Because you know what I mean? Anyway, sorry. Max out, but don't overwhelm. And to the point of maxing out, if we're expecting miracles, there's no limit as to what your EA is capable of. Your EA can do an entire business from the ground up. They can teach things you don't think they can teach. They can solve problems you don't think they can solve. They can identify new opportunities you don't think they can identify. Just give it to them. Very often, especially with resources that I really trust, Yvonne's a good example of this, I don't delegate projects anymore. The precursor to delegating projects, by the way, is delegating problems. Hey, dude, we have a massive attribution problem at Solutions 8. I don't know what the solution is. I don't know if we're going to change our pricing. I don't know if we're going to change our terms of service. I don't know if we can build an attribution software. I don't know if there's a way to sew this together. I don't know if a pre-existing solution already exists. Here's my problem. And then one of the smartest people I've ever worked with in my entire life will come to me and be like, here's what I think we should do. And if you don't like that, we can do this. The kid's brilliant. He's brilliant. He's a miracle. And because I put him in a position to really go off and spread his wings, the other thing that happens is when he makes a mistake, there's no recourse. It is what it is. That's life. Max out, don't overwhelm. A two-way communication, assume you're wrong. I already talked about that. This is my favorite one. Okay. So I saved this for the end because it requires all of the others. This is really, I think, the core framework of delegation. This is called the Black Box of Delegation. And here's the Black Box of Delegation. This is the way that you should delegate all things. And remember, everything else that we've talked about is already true, right? Projects, not tasks, authorship, groups, ownership. All of this coalesces into the Black Box of Delegation. The Black Box of Delegation says you, Mr. and Mrs. Entrepreneur, are allowed to define two things. First and most importantly, what comes out of the box. Hey, Camillo, I want a podcast. I actually might want a podcast business. That's what's coming out of the box. I want definitely a podcast for my mastermind, but probably enough infrastructure to where I could roll up a bunch of podcasts if I want to. Here's what's coming out of the box. I can also define, should I so choose, and you should, what goes in the box. I'm willing to spend this amount of money. I don't mind spending a couple of grand before it's a problem. Just don't come back to me if it's under this amount of money, just spend it. You also have these other resources available to you. Gina's here if you need help. I have these. Actually, this happened, Camilla. We had somebody else. We had Camilla at Pareto, and I forget who else. We had a couple of people working on a project that was all kind of relevant. So I was like, go talk to them before you go do anything. So this amount of money, these other people, this software, these resources, these brand guidelines, these rules and regs, these legal requirements, regulate, whatever, right? It has to be HIPAA compliant, whatever the input is. You get to define what comes out of the box. You get to define what comes in the box. What happens in the middle is none of your business. None of your business. And if you open the box, you ruin all things. You ruin your life, you ruin their lives. Leave it alone. What comes out of the box isn't what you wanted. Couple of things. First one, go check what you asked for the input. Did you define it properly? And if the answer is yes, then what on the input front should you have changed? Something comes out of the box. I'm like, dude, this doesn't match my brand at all. Like I asked you to build something for 3X Freedom and it doesn't use the logo, it doesn't use the colors, it doesn't use the font. Well, what does that mean? I'm at fault. Hey, dude, I'm so sorry. I should have given you my brand guidelines. I'll do that next time. Can you change it and update my brand? Right? And you know what's really nice about admitting to those mistakes is you put your employees in a position of managing you better next time. Because next time I assign that project, the employee goes, are there brand guidelines to this before you make me do this twice, you jackass? You can define what comes out of the box. You can define what comes into the box. If you're defining what comes out well and you're defining what comes in well and you're still not getting what you want, now you have a resource problem. And now you get to come to that person and be like, hey, dude, I think I did a really good job defining what comes out. I think I did a really good job defining what comes in. Where's the disconnect? What can I do better to make sure that we understand each other next time? And be receptive to the fact that maybe you're still wrong. But there's only so many times I'll let that process go wrong before I just say, hey, I don't know what's going on here, but I don't think we're a right fit for each other. My dad taught me this. One of the few things my father taught me. He said, if you ever fire somebody and they're surprised, you failed. So one thing that entrepreneurs tend to be afraid of is communication, especially if it's negative, because nobody wants to deliver negative communication. What I'll tell you is my experience with most entrepreneurs is they let little micro frictions go. Little mistake, let it 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 go. I am at my wit's end. You're fired. But the person didn't know. They didn't know. And so what you'd rather do is just, hey, buddy, just so you know, this is a problem. This is a problem. This is a problem. This is a problem. Hey, remember all those problems we talked about? This isn't going to work. It's so much more fair to allow for the small discomforts because otherwise people end up being surprised and now you failed them. My opinion is, and this gets a little, I don't know how it's going to come across, especially small employers or small teams, they want to be their employees' friends. It's the Michael Scott syndrome. We're all Michael Scott a little bit. You can't do that. That's the byproduct of leadership. You just have to lead. You have to step up and be like, I'm the one in charge. I say this is wrong and I got to tell you. And let me be receptive to you countering that opinion. That's the requirement of the Black Box of Delegation. If all you ever learned from me was a Black Box of Delegation, you'd be a superhero. Soccer ball delegation. And I need a better name for this, by the way. If anybody comes up with a better name, there's a prize. I don't know what it is yet. We'll think of it. But the thing that's fun about soccer, my 8-year-old loves soccer. He loves it, so he refuses to let me call it soccer too. He calls it football because he's obnoxious. The thing that's interesting about soccer is for 99% of this game, nobody's trying to score. It's amazing. It's the only game that I know like that. For 99% of the game, they're not trying to score. You're trying to get the ball closer to the goal. But you're actually not even necessarily getting it in the direction of the goal. Because if you can get it to the side of the goal, to the far corner, very often the most likely goal is one that comes in from the corner and then somebody kicks it towards the middle and somebody else assists. It's an amazing game for that reason. 99% of the game, you're not trying to score, you're just trying to get it close to the goal. That's delegation. Far too often when we delegate projects, we're like, all right, here's the goal and try to get close to the goal. Let's stop that. Just kick the damn ball. Okay, I know I need to write a book. I know I need to write a book on delegation. I have no idea what that book needs to look like. Do me a favor, Vicente. I need you to go watch every video, listen to every podcast, read every book, and take every course on delegation that feels worth taking. And then I need you to just compile the lexicon of knowledge that humanity has created and let me know, is this a book? Is this multiple books? Is it a series? Is it even a book? Should this be a course? Like, let's pull all this knowledge together. Bam, kicked the ball. What's really interesting about entrepreneurs is so often the things that are on your back burner, the projects that you're not getting to, you think need you. And I think very, very, very often they don't. You can give that to somebody else. Now, maybe it needs you at the end. Maybe you really do need to be the one that scores. Maybe it needs to be that records, I have to record this lesson. I have to write this book. I have to teach, whatever. It has to be me. I'm the one on stage. I'm the one that has to give this presentation. Fine. That's the very end. That's the goal. How many times can you kick the ball towards the goal before you get there? And it doesn't even need to be at the goal. I can't tell you how many times somebody creates something for me that I know isn't right, but it's closer. You know what I mean? It's closer. And I'm like, all right, that's great. Now kick it a little further and let's get a little closer there. Now kick it a little further and let's get a little closer there. And then now let's score. Soccer ball delegation. I like the way that Christina, she just dropped into chat. She said, basically Kaizen principle applied to delegation. So maybe Kaizen delegation. It's also called progressive planning in the project management space. I'd never heard the term progressive planning, but I like that too, because that gives a sense as to what's happening. I like it because it helps me understand the sequential nature of it. I dislike it because it sounds too structured. I want us to approach soccer ball delegation with the understanding that this is messy. And I want the employee to know it's messy too. Like, hey, I don't know what's going to happen here, but I know I want to enter this industry. Can you just, and then I kick the ball. I know I need to solve this problem. Kick the ball. Go research every solution that's available. Kick the ball. Whatever it is that you're doing, go. I'd love it if you were to do this now. If you have an EA, go look at your back burner. Go look at the list of things that you wish you could get to and figure out with every single one of them, How do I kick this ball? Vicente, this is the custom GPT, dude. We have a custom GPT that helps people identify how to kick the ball. So they say, here's the project or the task or the thing that I've been putting off or that I want to do or that's been weighing me down. And then the GPT helps them identify, here's the 1 or 2 or 3 ways that you can kick the ball. And then maybe even helps them in sequence. Now that they kicked the ball and that's come back, what's the next thing to do? We could have a whole kick the ball GPT. That'd be a lot of fun. And for every framework that we're building, by the way, we're trying to create custom GPTs and custom apps. The water wheel. This is another massive difference between employees and entrepreneurs. Here's what I see entrepreneurs do all the time. I've seen my business partners do this all the time. My business partner, who I loved and was an interesting character, she would show up at the end of the month and, there's 160 hours, roughly speaking, that somebody should have worked that month. And she'd show up at the end of the month, or let's say to make it easier, she'd show up on Friday or Thursday night with a week's worth of work and expect that it gets done by Friday. And she just had this thing in her mind that said, everybody who works for me must do a week's worth of work, and I can assign that week's worth of work at any point in time that I want, and it has to be done by the end of the week. And that's maybe an extreme example, but I believe that we all do that as entrepreneurs. We tend to work as it occurs to us and stop getting work when we lose interest or get distracted with other things. And the issue with that is employees function, they're what? They're 9-to-5ers. They're consistent, consistency, predictability. I like to think of them as a water wheel. The water wheel turns, and the water wheel can actually turn really freaking fast. But the water wheel only turns for as long as it's being fed with water. When you stop feeding the water wheel with water, it slows down, and then one day it stops turning. And as often as not, I see entrepreneurs show up 2 weeks later after stop feeding the water with water saying, why don't I have 2 weeks worth of whatever the water meal should have produced? Or they'll show up 2 weeks later saying, here's the 2 weeks I forgot to give you. Go spin faster, water wheel, which now stresses employees out and puts you in a position of friction. And for the entrepreneur, it's like, I'm paying you to do 2 weeks worth of work. Here's 2 weeks worth of work. And for the employee, it's like, no, you're paying me to do an hour, 8 hours a day, every day, or whatever the makeup is. We have to make sure that the water wheel keeps spinning. This aligns very well with the max out, but don't overwhelm. I never want my water wheel not to have water. Ever, ever, never, ever. So make sure there's enough work there. Now, a good employee is going to prioritize and say, I'm not doing this, I'm going to do this. And by the way, hey boss, this is going to be late. If you keep giving me this stuff, this one thing's going to be late because these other 3 things are urgent and I have to do them. Great. Thank you so much for letting me know. Awesome. Expectation managed. That's what I want and I need. But we have to look at all of our human resources is limited in that way. We don't have time machines. And if you don't give people the work that needs to be done within the confines of the pre-established agreement, they don't get to make it up later. That, by the way, is the entrepreneurial way to think. The way that we work ourselves is, oh, I can do that tonight. I can do that over the weekend. I can do that whatever. We think about our bandwidth in those terms. Employees don't think about their bandwidth in those terms. And that's the best way to lose really good employees, is to force bandwidth into a frame that has not been agreed to. This is the other thing that I don't like it when I see employees working really hard nights and weekends, because I wonder if I've failed. So there are some people, like sometimes somebody gets really obsessive with a project. I love that. But I'll send a message saying, hey, just so you know, there's no expectation. Like I'll send a message on the weekend. I'll send a message in the evening. And then I'll say, there's no expectation that you respond to this or you do this work. Because what I want to avoid is losing a good resource or burning somebody out. Now, if somebody wants to take it and run with it, fan-freaking-tastic. That's the best way to force me into a position of later aligning our incentives further. Number 4, delegation mentality. I think that the mentality with which we approach things is just as important as the way that we execute on those tasks. But I think that you can spiritually infuse things with your perspective, your paradigm, your opinion of it. And what I mean by that is I think if you go into something saying, there's a fun story about a woman, she was in church, a lady's in church, and the pastor is reading from the pulpit saying, I forgot the verse, I'm going to butcher it, but something to the effect of, if you have the faith of a mustard seed, you can move a mountain. And so she runs home and she's so excited and she sees a mountain out through her window and she's like, tomorrow you're going to be moved. And she goes to bed and then she wakes up and she sprints outside and she looks out the window and she goes, I knew it would still be there, right? Like that's if you approach an endeavor knowing it's going to fail, it'll fail. If you approach an endeavor knowing it's going to succeed, it succeeds. If you approach an endeavor knowing people are miracles, they'll produce miracles. Let's talk about the mentality with which we need to approach delegation. Number 1, start small. Start small. New employees don't get delegated massive projects, right? It's training wheels. Start small and work your way up, and realize that the employee isn't the only one on training wheels. You are too. And no matter how good you get at delegation, everybody you hire is going to be a little different. So it's not just training wheels for them, it's training wheels for you. You could be a master of delegation. I am. And everybody I hire, I start to realize like, oh, here's how I need to talk to you. Here's how I need to interface with you. Here's how I need to ask for feedback from you. Here's where you struggle. Here's where you don't. And every human becomes a different instrument in your symphony. As soon as that stops being true, you have a bureaucracy and your business starts to suck. As soon as you stop treating people like individual miracles and you start treating, and by the way, this is a natural byproduct of business growth. It's the balance of risks. As your business grows, so too do you diminish the effect and impact of the miracle that is a human. When I have Julian, who's a phenomenal designer and great at naming things and he's very slow. He's very intentional. If I have a Julian, that's a miracle. If I have 5 graphic designers, I have a bureaucracy. And now maybe I can still continue to use them and look at them as though they're individuals and unique and miracles. But when 5 turns to 10 and 10 turns to 50, I diminish my ability to do that. Bringing that all the way back, this isn't something that you're going to build upon in a scalable fashion. Delegation needs to be learned on a per person basis. So strap your training wheels back on for every new hire, number 1. Number 2, it's difficult to delegate if there's something you're afraid of. And there's a lot that we're all afraid of. You'll notice the things that you avoid delegating are the things that you're most afraid of. And so I think very, very often what we need to do is we need to go and we need to address those fears and we need to get to the bottom of why we're afraid. For me, the fear very often stems from being usurped. I'm afraid of being irrelevant. One of my core needs in life is relevance. It's the reason that I produce a bunch of content for free and I try to train people on things, because you can view it as altruism as you want, but it's just a different kind of selfishness. I just want to be needed. I want to be helpful. I want to get to the end and realize that I did something impactful. It's very selfish. And hopefully it's selfishness with a positive impact. I'm afraid of being usurped. I tell this story often of Christina Hooper, who I love to death and is absolutely brilliant. I'm coaching this group of people. There's 30 some odd people in my coaching cohort. I'm a horrible coach. I've never coached before. I don't know how to coach. I'm afraid, and I have massive imposter. And it was a huge opportunity for me because it was the first time digital marketer ever turned to me and said, you know what, I actually think that you're maybe worthy of being on our faculty. And there were other things that were possible because of that opportunity. And so I show up to this group with that fear. And then in walks Christina Hooper. She joined a little late, not too much. And she was really quiet. And she's really shy. And she was hesitant to participate, but she started to speak up a little. And every time she started to speak up, people would be like, God, that was smart. And then so that would embolden her and she'd speak up a little more. And then they'd be like, wow, that's brilliant. And then they'd embolden her and she'd speak up a little more. And it got to the point where, from my perspective, I wasn't coaching that cohort. She was. And I had this moment where I was like, how do I get this woman to shut the hell up? Like, how do I, which is horrible, right? It's the most shameful thing. It's like, here's a person who's providing a ton of value to these people who need it. And because I was thinking so small and being so insecure, my first instinct was like, how do I cancel her? And thank God I didn't succumb to my baser desires. And instead, I was like, all right, she's better than I am. And so I started to defer to her. And people would ask questions. And when I knew that she had the answer, it would be better than me answering it. I'd be like, Christina, what do you think? And I became more of a moderator than a coach. And it culminated in this moment that was like, it was miraculous. There was this woman who was in our coaching cohort who was a nightmare. She wouldn't listen to anybody. She kept asking the same questions. She wouldn't make any progress. She was just an obstinate mule. And Christina decided to step up one day and just manhandle her, just grab her by the ears, and in the kindest, sweetest, most empathic way, walked her through the Socratic process where she helped this person identify her purpose in life. And it's recorded. I think, do you still have that on your website somewhere? Yeah, feel free to share that in the chat if you want to. Y'all, it was beautiful. It was watching like magic happen. And that never would have happened if I had allowed myself to continue to be afraid of Christina. And I think that that's going to be true for all of us. Our ability, there's a fun archetypal story about the Knights of the Round Table that says that in order to pursue the Holy Grail, each of the knights had to enter the forest at the part that appeared darkest to them, which is the narrative way of saying everything that you need is on the other end of that which you fear most. And so looked at that through a delegation lens. When you're afraid of something, we have to address the fear, because then on the other end of it, we're able to enlist other people to help us in a way that we wouldn't be able to be helped otherwise, which is really profound. I have 17 different entities that I have a meaningful tax relevant ownership percentage of, all but 2 of which produce some amount of income. So I don't own 17 different domain names. I own 17 businesses, all of which have some amount of money that for me is basically mailbox money. And it's because I let other people run things for me. So on the other end of this overcoming of fear, y'all, is I can tell you, I'm a 7-figure net income earner per annum. And I don't say that to brag. I say that because it used to piss me off how much people wouldn't talk about money when I was a young entrepreneur. Like, there's $1 million a year on the other end of this, learning this skill. And if at the risk of sounding like a douchebag, I've made other people millionaires too. Yvonne was my EA. Kid's a millionaire now. You know what I mean? John Moran was my employee. Dude's a multimillionaire now. I've helped a lot of people, and that feels pretty good. And you can do that when you equip those people to be miracles. The analogy I like to come back to for entrepreneurs is you create sandboxes, they create sandcastles. And this, which is more important? You know what I mean? The sandcastle is way more important than the sandbox, but the sandcastle can't exist without the box. And if you can create that, the sandcastle that's created inside of your sandbox, you end up benefiting more from than they do. Interestingly, it's a weird framework, isn't it? And that's the way things are structured. Trust has to outweigh fear. And you need to build trust with your resources, and they need to build trust with you. They have to trust, and this is really important, and this becomes very cultural. I'm going to get real racist, and then we can all see how well I do this and whether or not I get canceled. Different cultures have different receptivities to risk. And actually, it was an EA that taught me this. My EA Sergio, who's one of the best I've ever had. There's the 5 dimensions of culture. And the 5 dimensions of culture, which were created by a social scientist, one of them measures the risk receptivity culturally of different peoples, let's say. And a lot of this just has to do with the way that they're treated culturally. So my experience and my own personal opinion, and everybody's a unique and beautiful snowflake, but let me just stereotype humans. People in East Asia have a massive barrier towards stepping outside of the box that's been allotted to them. And the reason for that is because they get punished. So if you have a Filipino employee or a Vietnamese employee and you ask them to do something unconventional or unique, they're not going to be as receptive to it because in their culture, it's sit down, shut up, follow the rules, stereotypically speaking. Now, that doesn't mean they're not creative people. They're actually extraordinarily creative, but they have to trust you. They have to trust that they're not going to be punished for making a mistake. I had a young man at Solutions 8 spend $50,000 of a client's money that he shouldn't have spent. Big mistake. We got it figured out. Business insurance covered 80% of it. Cost me 10 grand. He's one of the best I've ever had. But what was interesting that I loved so much is right after that happened, the whole company knew it happened, and the whole company knew how me and John responded to it. And after that, trust went through the freaking roof. The employees knew, like, oh shit, those guys aren't going to hang us out to dry. Like, that guy's still got a job. He managed my biggest client ever, publicly traded company, paid me $54,000 a month. He was an amazing employee, made a mistake. Trust factor went up massively. When people make mistakes, that's your opportunity to build trust. Doesn't mean that they don't fix the mistake. You don't attend to it. You don't talk about it. You don't make sure it doesn't happen again. But very often when somebody makes a mistake, our inclination is take this away and never give that person that task again. The thing about somebody making a mistake is, generally speaking, with a conscientious human, that'll be the last time they ever do that. You know what I mean? Like, that's the person to make sure actually is responsible for that new thing now because they know the impact of the mistake. Build trust. They have to build trust with you. So when you hand somebody something, you have to know that it's going to get done. You need to build trust with them. What I tell my employees very often, and I actually stopped saying this, and I need to get back to it. If I give you 10 things to do and you do 9 of them perfectly, but you always forget or fail at 1, you're actually worthless to me in as much as stress relief is concerned. Because it's not like I'm going to give you 10 things to do and you're going to say, hey, boss, this is the one I'm going to forget, right? And then I'm like, okay, that'll be the one I watch. No, I'm going to give you 10 things to do. And now subconsciously, I have to worry about all 10 of them. We need 10 out of 10 people. And then you have people like Yvonne that are 11 out of 10 people who will do all 10 of the things that you need and then do the one thing that you forgot to ask them to do. That's building trust. That's what you need from your staff. That's what a miracle does. And then you build trust with them. And trust needs to trump fear. I should have segued over to my next slide. Mistakes will happen. How you attend to mistakes is going to impact massively how you build those trusts. The backtracking of delegation and the time compression. What's interesting about this is you can look at the frameworks that you've built for your own delegation and put people in a position of doing jobs better, faster, and easier. Everything that you delegate on a long enough timeline can become systemized. What I like to say, there's 3 rules. Can I eliminate this? If not, can I automate this? If not, can I delegate this? And sometimes when you're delegating something, it gets delegated so often and so well that you can now back up and automate it or back up and eliminate it. So delegation shouldn't ever be the end solution, especially for recurring tasks. The other thing that I'll offer, and this is where time compression comes into play. I had this experience very recently with a client who hired one of our EAs and said, hey, dude, I'm a little upset. And I said, why? And he goes, well, it takes her about an hour to do something. No, it takes her about 4 hours to do something it would take me an hour to do. And I'm like, okay, first of all, you're a world authority. You've been doing this for 20 years. What's your hourly billable? And I forgot what his billable was, but it was expensive. Let's say it's $1,000 an hour. I'm like, great. You're paying her $30 an hour, whatever he's paying her. So she's taking 4 hours, right? So there's $120 to your $1,000. You're looking at this in the wrong way. Like, the amplification of your time is far more valuable than the amount of time it's going to take this person. And the better they get, the more time compresses. So how we gauge success is really important in the world of delegation. The other thing that I really like to do is everybody's worried about standard operating procedures. And this is a massive unlock, y'all. This is huge for your business. Entrepreneurs, a lot of entrepreneurs, not all of them, but a lot of entrepreneurs seem to think they need to build the system first, build the process first, and then plug a human into it. I do the opposite. I say, I have this problem, go solve it. And then once they've solved it, I say, great, now teach me how to solve it and build a system for everybody who comes after you. That's the way to build standard operating procedures, because you're probably going to build it wrong because you don't do the work on a day-to-day basis. So if you really want an SOP-driven business, let an industrious pioneer within your organization solve the problem first, because it's, try and fail and try and fail and try and fail, 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 try and succeed. So they found the one way out of 500 that works instead of building an arbitrary SOP and then following those SOPs and finding out they don't work, and then backtrack and then build the SOP. That's the best way to build an organization that actually scales. I hate the word scale. The other thing to do is modular delegation. Look at this visual. Vicente, you're a genius, dude. This is so good. Modular delegation. What I like about modular delegation is when you have resources that are good at specific things, you offer those things to those specific resources. And this is where you have to know your people. I also like modular delegation because it allows you to be very nimble. If you build something from a foundational perspective, meaning I'm going to build the whole first floor, and I'm going to build the whole second floor, and I'm going to build the whole third floor. Shit, second floor ceilings aren't high enough. Quick, raise the whole building, right? Now we have to rebuild. As opposed to, I'm going to build this asset in this way, step by step. That's my module. Modular delegation gives you the ability to be nimble. It feels inefficient. But it also puts you in a position of having a business that can actually be flexible, nimble, managed. Now, the very last thing I want to talk about is honestly the least effectual thing for us to talk about in the course, and maybe more importantly, something that you should do yourself. And we should have a custom GPT for this too, Vicente, now that I'm thinking about it. Let's have a GPT that helps people identify what they should be delegating based off of who they are, what their business is, where they are in their business, etc. This is just a beginning of a list of ideas. Inbox management and calendar management are absolute prerequisites. If you're managing these yourself, you're wasting so much time on things that are unnecessary. Research is one of my favorite things to delegate because it massively accelerates processes. This is the way to kick the ball down the field. Project management is like a catch-all, right? But you shouldn't be managing projects because you're an entrepreneur. You're bad at it. Have an EA do it because they tend to be far better and far more adept. Vendor management, employee management, coordination of maintenance and services. Like, here's the other thing too, is if you have people providing services to you, chances are they begin to slip over time. Unless you say to your EA, hey, can you please follow up on those folks? I have investments that require a yield. So I've invested money in certain things where people are supposed to pay me monthly or quarterly, and they forget or they don't all the time. I have my CFO, Esteban, follow up with those people. And guess what? I get paid before other investors do. If I didn't have Esteban, it would be a year later and I'd be like, wait a minute, you owe me a year's worth of yield. And now I'm not necessarily going to get that. High yield savings. This was one of my favorite examples is I had my EA go and do research on high yield savings accounts, and she found an account that was yielding 2% more than anything else I could find. And 2% more on the sum of money I was investing ended up being thousands of dollars. So a half hour of her time ended up being worth thousands of dollars. Another one of our EAs, Ampy, who's Yvonne's EA, is the one that found our insurance, which again was massively cheaper and had far more coverage than anything else that I could find. It was thousands of dollars of leverageable value in one task. Here's the 12-week delegation schedule that we use at Pareto Talent. You don't have to follow this schedule, but I just think it's a good example of what's possible. And then we also have our delegation hub, business tasks, administrative tasks, research and analysis, personal tasks, creative tasks. Like, there's a lot we can do. So delegation challenge, delegation hub, etc. This is the most important thing for an entrepreneur to learn to do. When you learn talent, well, I'll say this differently. Before you learn talent, all problems are your problem. That's why business feels so overwhelming in the beginning. I promise you, statistically speaking, I make way more money than anybody else in my community and I work less. Isn't that obnoxious to say? And I'm way less overwhelmed than anybody because before you crack the talent code, all problems are your problems. Oh God, I have a finance problem. I have to go learn finance. I have an operations problem. I have to learn operations. I have a marketing problem. I have to learn marketing. I have an insert anything here problem. I have to learn anything here. For me, I have this problem. Got to go find somebody good at this and never deal with that problem again. Because then I have that person and I just kick the problem to that person. So if you can crack the talent code, that's the only code you need to crack from an entrepreneurial perspective. I'm going to continue to beat this drum. If you're in the private group, the incubator, what I'm going to ask of you, if you're willing, start bringing your EAs. A shout out to Matt Nye, who inspired this, by the way. Start bringing your EAs to the call. What I'd like us to do is I'd like us to start coaching our EAs to do things for you on these calls. I want everybody to get really good at this, and you can watch me do it. I do it with my team all the time. I'd love to help you do it. Bring your EA, and then as we learn other frameworks and start to traverse other topics, we'll use our EAs to execute on our behalves. If you don't have an EA, go get my free book. Follow that process. It'll take you a weekend. You're 7 steps from the best hire you've ever made in your entire life. But you're going to need that in order to execute on everything that you want to execute. I have to hop because I have another call. I love you all dearly and deeply. I'll see you next Friday. High fives, etc.